The history of gun control in America is a complex and often contentious narrative, shaped by cultural, political, and historical events. Here's an overview, with specific instances where events not directly related to firearms have influenced gun control legislation, early foundations, and the Second Amendment. The roots of American gun control trace back to the founding of the nation, with the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1791, stating, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." This provision set the stage for the national debate between balancing gun rights and regulation. The Wild West and early regulations. In the late 1800s, despite the popular image of the Wild West, frontier towns like Dodge City, Kansas, enacted some of the first gun control measures, often requiring visitors to turn over their guns to local authorities. These measures were not merely attempts to control guns, but to establish order and reduce violence in rapidly growing frontier towns. The National Firearms Act of 1934. This piece of legislation was one of the first federal gun control laws, enacted in part due to public outrage over gangster-related violence during Prohibition, which ironically was not primarily about gun violence, but about organized crime related to the illegal alcohol trade. The act targeted automatic weapons and sawed-off shotguns, requiring registration and imposing a tax on the manufacturing and transfer of these firearms. The Gun Control Act of 1968. The assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., none of which were directly related to everyday gun violence, profoundly impacted American society and led to the Gun Control Act of 1968. This law broadly regulated the firearms industry and firearms owners, focusing on prohibiting interstate firearms transfers, except among licensed manufacturers, dealers, and importers. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993. Following the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan in 1981, which critically wounded his press secretary James Brady, this act was introduced. The Brady Act implemented federal background checks on firearm purchasers in the United States and imposed a 5-day waiting period on purchases until the NICS, National Instant Criminal Background Check System, was implemented in 1998. The Federal Assault Weapons Ban of 1994. The 1994 Federal Assault Weapons Ban, which expired in 2004, was part of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. It was influenced significantly by public outcry following several mass shootings, including the 1989 Stockton schoolyard shooting and the 1993 101 California street shooting. Though these events involved firearms, the legislation was controversial because it also targeted firearms that were not typically used in the majority of gun crimes. School shootings and contemporary measures. The increase in school shootings, especially events like the Columbine High School massacre in 1999 and the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, shifted public focus significantly toward measures that restrict access to firearms. These tragic events, involving educational institutions rather than typical crime scenes, have spurred ongoing debates and legislation at both state and federal levels focusing on issues such as background checks, mental health considerations, and the types of firearms accessible to the public. Quotes. Reflecting the gun control. Debate. Over the years, numerous figures have voiced opinions that illustrate the intensity and complexity of the gun control debate. Ronald Reagan, a proponent of gun rights, paradoxically supported the Brady Bill after leaving office, stating, "If the passage of the Brady Bill were to result in a reduction in the loss of life by handguns, it would be well worth making it the law of the land." Barack Obama, after the Sandy Hook shooting, said, "We can't tolerate this anymore. These tragedies must end, and to end them, we must change." The history of gun control in America shows that significant legislation often follows public reactions to high-profile events rather than everyday gun violence. This pattern highlights the complex interplay between societal values, political pressures, and legislative action in shaping gun control laws.